have to. So I'm just getting my,
That's working now. We can see it.
okay. I'm trying to frame it a little bit better so you just see the pretty part. Let's see. How's that look?
Someone needs to turn their radio off or mute.
So is that a really good, are y'all seeing it full frame? Like you can't see any of the borders, it's just
Full frame.
just the
That's
pretty
looking
part.
good now. Yes.
Okay, good. We got it going on. So compositional artistry in your photography, what I mean by that is the decisions that you make in the moment that you're taking a photograph. And one thing that I've talked about is knowing what you like, that when we go out with our cameras or if we start to create a setup in our home, or if we're out walking around looking for something, that we start with an idea, that we have something in mind of what we would really, really like as our highest ideal to capture. That way we're already on track to make that happen. But then the other side, and this is when we're going out as photographers, the world is coming back to meet us. Yes, we're drawing to us what we want, but we also have to be ready to react to it. So by being really aware of our given frame area and deciding up front that we're going to use that area fully, then when we go out, we are going to be more aware and we're going to be offered choices on what we let into that frame and then what we keep out. Photography is composition. It's what you choose to leave in and leave out of your camera's frame in the moment that you are taking the photograph. And I have no problem with post-production work. I do it all the time. I have to do it all the time for my clients and for publishing stuff that I'm working on. But as much as I can let the camera do it for me, and if I can use my camera creatively, then I've already gotten way ahead of the curve. I'm going to be starting with an image that's already very, very strong. And again, the decisions that you make up front as you're taking the photograph are what matters the most. What shapes will you let into your image? How tightly does your given area of your frame hold those shapes to create lines, to create tension? And I'm always aware of opportunities that could be hiding right there in plain sight. So I'm looking for shapes, for leading lines and perspective to make my subject more interesting. And all of these, it was how close can I get and make the shapes of the staircase more dramatic.
Robin, which one did you start with and which one did you end?
Oh, on these?
Yes.
It was in that order. Because the first one I'm looking up, the second one I'm starting to go up, and then the third I'm looking back down.
Thank you.
And I didn't put them in that order chronologically. I just kind of liked how they looked as a triptych. This was at one of those great old houses over on Druid Hills, and they were having an estate sale. And I love to go to those houses when they have them, because the structure of the house, you can really get great photographs. This house was full of stuff, of furniture, of all kinds of things. So when you went in, there wasn't really a photograph because there was all of this clutter of stuff. But I found this. I wasn't even really expecting it, but there was nothing else there except the stairs, the light, and the window. So when you're out walking around, you may have a very, very strong, great simplified photograph, and it's just in a little area. There could be something really distracting here and something really hideous here, but right in the sweet spot, you can find things that are hiding in plain sight. So often what a photograph is really about, and what makes it more interesting, is what is left out. It's what we don't see. So here I've made a decision to crop out anything that's not reflected in the water surface. These little bugs were twitching around and making the water have these really cool ripples. And I didn't want to have the real tree. I think you can see in this one. But I made my own set of rules to have the show. All of the effects are in camera. This is what it looked like, really straight out of the camera. And I used the 2:3 ratio of my given area to compose in. So there's nothing in here that's not edge to edge. In the bottom picture, if you look close, there's a little bit of a green twig sticking in at the top, but I kind of liked it. It kind of tied it to the image above it. So I allowed that to be in there, but otherwise I only had what was reflected in the water, and everything else was, when I say cropped out, what I really should say composed out. It was not after cropped. It was composed out. And that's the fun, I mean, you're getting in there, and if there's some offensive shrubbery over here, then you get to crop it out. And if there are any blurry wisps or tree twigs around the edges, you can compose them out. But if you do get these little things sticking in there, it's better to retouch them out than to change your whole image. If I cropped part of it away, I could be cropping away part of my design that I really wanted to keep. So it would be better just to retouch out any of those little twigs that stick in from the side. That happens, that happens all the time. So again, a green piece of shrubbery, ugly, offensive shrubbery, as y'all know how I like to say, it would ruin this. I mean, there's a little red leaf and a little yellow leaf on the surface of the water, but it didn't. I kind of liked it. But if it had been something that offended me, I would just retouch it out. So no matter if you're doing nature photography, street photography, or if you're doing a setup in your studio, your subject is your subject, but the sense of space, of everything around her, the depth of the room, the furniture, some other little elements of light I thought were important to entertain the eye. The sweep of her dress creates this counterclockwise spiral as our eye kind of travels through the image. And I think our eye is entertained by these other shapes. If we let our subject fool us, like this is the same image just cropped to what some people may think, oh, that's the subject, that's what's important, it's just her. But I think we've unwittingly cropped away the cycle of energy of eye movement. in the portrait. And it's more like a painting because we see the set, you know, we have a sense of the room. And here we lose that. And, you know, as I've worked with my students and I've been judging and looking at images, I would have the feeling that maybe they had cropped an important part of their image away, that the image had this truncated feeling. I mean, they had lost pixels, or, you know, something had happened. It just didn't ring true somehow with the optics of the lens. I mean, there was just something, and I'll show you an example of that too. But don't let your subject fool you, because it's not all about them. It's all about these other things. And I know people are laughing at me when I'm taking a photograph, but I don't care. I mean, I'm hopping around, I'll get down low, I'll crawl on the ground. It doesn't matter. I'm going to get the position that I want to be in, right? So feel free to change your point of view, side to side, high or low. Even little tiny adjustments mean a lot. I mean, if you just move a tiny bit and you get nice separation between shapes when before they were overlapping, when you get that nice separation and you start to see leading lines and harmonic alignments start to form, then that's when photography gets really, really exciting. And you're doing it in the moment. So get down low, climb up high. Just use your viewpoint to your advantage. I think just standing there in one place without exploring your options really limits us. So another exercise I like to do is to get closer, even closer, or maybe much further back where the subject is just a little part of this whole big landscape, you know. There's always that point where it becomes the most interesting, and that's what I'm always looking for. So when I'm hopping around taking this picture, this is what I was photographing. And it was interesting because the one that worked the best was the one where the horizon line was crooked. So, you know, following the rules that the horizon has to be straight, when I straightened it, it just went flat and I couldn't figure out why. So I went back and started looking at these shapes. And again, there's this counterclockwise spiral of shapes that are happening here. Now, of course, I didn't see this, you know, when I was taking the photograph, but there's a feeling where the tension of the shapes in your image begin to interact with the frame itself. That's why the image area is so important. It is the point of reference that all of these things ricochet off of. So, you know, don't feel like you have to go out and make these, you know, fractal diagrams when you're shooting. But you know how when you take a photograph and you're just like, that's the one, you'll usually find out that something like this is going on. So we're understanding the importance of the edge of the photo. In this case, the circle here, which is this bud in springtime, and the circle is more empowered when it's inside a square as it gets closer to the edge of the frame. So yes, the circle within the square is one of the most ancient and pleasing forms that we see in art and in architecture and in symbolism. But in here, while I was seeing just how close I can get it to the edge without snipping it off, that's when it created this tension where the bud is about to just burst open out of the frame. If I had been, and if you kind of step back and look at it, it creates this optical illusion where it is bulging out of the frame at you. Don't let your subject distract you. The photo is never about the subject alone. And that's what I was talking about earlier with that portrait photograph. Everything in your photograph is first and foremost a shape that has nothing to do with your subject. So I love having a model or a figure in the room, but I want to see the room. I want to see the overall scene. And it's these other elements that are crucial that make up these connecting shapes and lines and shadows. I mean, here the shadow, if you look at her shadow, it's very important. It's another shape that's supporting the subject. All of these lines pointing down at her are pointing back to her. So when I look, and we did this in Cortona, there's a beautiful palazzo where we can go in and take photographs and run around and do whatever we like. And we can use window light, which is one of my favorite things to do. But I wanted this to look like something was happening, that we had gone back in time, or that perhaps it was a still from a film, perhaps, that there was something going on. And again, it's the scene itself and the light that are as equally important as her. The most important part of photography is the moment we make the shot. And if it does not have that spark of magic in real life, I have found in my own work that no amount of post-production will save it. If I'll say, oh, this one's almost good, I'll work on it, and I'll work on it. It's still like, it didn't have that. And you guys know what I'm talking about. When you have an image that you really, really love, you probably like it from the very, very beginning. So this is the same horse, and it was taken just a few seconds apart. And it's the relationship between everything in the image that creates visual impact. Everything within our frame relates to everything else. And as you can see, it makes a really big difference. And the horse on the left could really be a small horse or a pony. We don't have a clue that it's really this giant draft horse until I got a more dramatic angle. And of course, the nice girl is in there adding some drama to it, But it's so amazing how the same horse can be so different. These next photographs that I'm going to show you were taken in the 1960s by Alan Matthews, who was my teacher and mentor. He started the Cortona Center of Photography back in 1998 that I'm still doing today. And this work, it's the very first photographs that he took and kept. He started out shooting color photography and he just wasn't feeling it. And then he discovered a way to get this really great contrast but detail through his darkroom work. And he did this series. He would go every day out and photograph these workers on the train. So the real reason I want to show you this series is because of the feet. And if you look at these images that I'm going to show you two more, they're figures standing in their element. They're in the train station, in the train yard. And they have a firm foundation. There is a geometry that supports the figures. So it would not be as strong if everything in there didn't support them. But also their feet are supported. They have a really, really great great foreground. And again, these two, the weight at the bottom is just so much more pleasing. And when I judge photo competitions, you would be amazed how many otherwise really, really powerful shots get voted out because of this very issue. It's top heavy. There's a blank sky with nothing happening, and the feet are either too close to the edge at the bottom, or perhaps they've been completely cut off. So, you know, when you're looking at a person and you start looking at their head, you tend to put it in the middle. But there's all of these great elements of the foreground that add interesting shapes. So remember when you're shooting to put lots of weight underneath people's feet. And this is one that I took at our street photography workshop in Macon. And I almost cropped, I mean, really, this could have been tipped down more. You know, it's very important to tip it down. I say that to myself when I'm photographing people, you know, get all the feet, tip it down. If I'm not going to get weight under their feet, then, and if I cut off part of their foot, I'm just going to trash the whole photo. I'm not going to use it. But I would intentionally crop it, maybe mid-thigh or at a person's waist or something like that. But when it's happening really fast, it's hard to think fast in the moment, but tip it down, you know. I really wish I had a little bit less and just a little bit more weight under his foot. It would be a better shot. So these are two more of Alan's Tuscany portraits. And these people, you know, we're seeing them in their setting, but yet there is a tension that fills the frame. And he has included their hands. I think their hands are a very, very important part of these portraits. They're just in there. And there's tension with their heads to the top of the frame. You know, there's a real consciousness of taking care to intentionally include what's important. So this is mostly foreground, you know. There were not any great clouds. If there were really cool clouds, I probably would have cropped away the foreground and gotten more of the sky and the ship. But if they're not great clouds, then I really limit the sky. And when I can, I even crop it out completely if it's a, you know, super clear day. And it's fine if you want to add clouds. I don't have a problem with that at all. You just need to make sure that they are the same optic width as your existing photo so that it rings true. And this is one more from Alan. You know, here he's barely got their feet in, but that's very important. Alan always printed the film border. So this black line that's around the image, it is no joke. It is the film edge. So he filed out his film holders on his enlarger to get them to reveal this black edge of the film, because he's saying, this is the entire image as I intended it. And he would order mats that were cut to a point of a millimeter, no joke, because I had to put them in the mats. But you would have to align them so that the black film border was perfectly holding the image exactly inside the mat, because that's how important it was to him. These are all composed in camera. And I saw this when there was a Cartier-Bresson show at the High Museum. It showed the back of his photographs. And he put a stamp on his images that said, this is my photograph. as I intended it. He also did the black line, and he did not want his images to be cropped away, and he did not want any of his captions to be edited either, because he was working as a photojournalist and he wanted his intentions to remain intact. So it says photos must not be altered by trimming. And this is one I took in Cortona at the beautiful theater where we get to go and take photographs. And the film border here, it reminds me to include the feet and look for the foreground shapes and create tension within the frame as I'm taking the picture. So I was talking earlier about mats and how mats or frames can eat into your intended image. So be really aware of that. You know, here I'm adding a black border, and I'm even adding more to the black line to connect to the mat. And I don't want to lose any of the image. You know, the bottom, there's this little sliver at the bottom of both of these that's important. That's, you know, supporting it, but there's tension at the bottom. So that black line is allowing me to have that. I think if that black line around the image were not there, it would lose some of that impact. So when you mat and frame your work, think about it intentionally. So this is a little illustration about after cropping. And you guys may have seen this before, so I will make this part quick. But a student had presented this at the Delaware workshop, and I was like, you know, why is it pixelated? Why is it this strange shape? It's not a rectangle, it's not a square, it's kind of weird. So I discovered that this was her original image, which is so much better. And all of these magic squares, because the 2:3 35 millimeter ratio is really a subdivision of squares within squares. So all of the stuff in this simple shot is going on. And then there are these intersecting circles, which are creating a whole nother flower that's, you know, all of those arcs that are in there in our mind's eye, we know that they're extended outside of the frame itself, you know. It's entertaining our brain. Okay, so that's enough, you know, you get the idea. But on the left, there's the cropped, and then and you can see obviously how much better her original shot was. If you've ever had a 2:3 ratio 35 millimeter image and you had a fine art frame that's a 4:5 proportion, and you have to crop down that image and put it in that frame, then you've probably seen the energy of your shot just wither away and die. I mean, it's so painful. And I did that, and I was like, wow, I used to love the shot, and then it got chopped off in this frame, and it's not the same. So luckily now you can get frames that are 2:3 ratio, and you know, if you're shooting 4:5, this was a 4:5 proportion shot, then, you know, it can be framed to the, you know, 4:5 view camera proportion, but you can see that's still a perfect square. So the architecture and how I composed it within the 4:5 shape is still a square, you know. So start out by choosing the format. Know ahead of time what your image area ratio is going to be. This is a view camera shot that I took that's 4:5, and I'm showing you the border of the 4:5 film here. That's how it was. But, maybe it would be better cropped as a 2:3. I mean, there's more tension there. I mean, that's fine. That has a little more tension. I don't know. It's your decisions. It's your creative decisions. And this is something you definitely should consider. If you really, really use this frame, being fully in the moment means seeing your full image area. So if things aren't happening and it looks flat, then take this shape of your camera and get consciously closer and closer. And then these really cool alignments and things will just naturally start to form. It's the harmonic area that you've been given. So use it creatively. Again, these are ways that images can subdivide in the 2:3 35 millimeter film ratio proportion that I love. Edge to edge, corner to corner, that is when our images get stronger and stronger. The other format that really thrills me is the square. And it becomes a great game of what you want to include or not include in your defined image area. I knew these were going to be squares. So I'm thinking of that shape as I'm shooting it, even though these were not shot with a square format, medium format. I knew that I was going to have that tension of the square. And it's this, again, this dramatic thing. How close can I get it to the edge, but not yet crop it off? So, this little tension above the urn where just that sliver, even here, the little cherub's head is going into the edge of just barely into the edge of the film. So it's that tension that I'm playing with. I mean, sometimes I crop off too much and it's, that's no good, but it's just that sweet little area of tension at the edge. The power of the square, any combination of a true square is pleasing. But when you do it, hold down your key that keeps it a perfect square. You know what I'm saying? If you're shooting with 2:3 ratio, keep your top and bottom edge intact. Just know you're going to lose a little bit off of the edges, right? Decide up front what your format will be and why, and stick with it. The metal that I was printing on was 3 feet wide by 6 feet tall, and I wanted to use all of that. So I said, okay, I'm going to have 2 perfect squares, one stacked on top of the other, like this vertical panorama. And it's going to make the buildings and the statuesque women look even more elongated because they're tall and narrow. The metal sheets that they're printed on are tall and narrow. And I knew I was going to be shaving off a sliver on either side of my 35 millimeter camera, right? So I know that's going to happen. Here you can see what I'm talking about. That was my full frame. But I didn't crop off the top and bottom because I didn't want to lose pixels. Because I'm printing it so big, I can't afford to lose any pixels. It's, the print, the metal prints were 6 feet tall. And, I've also, you can see them behind me, I've also printed them conventionally, but on the really big ones, I could not afford to lose any of my valuable real estate. So the only part that went away were just the two side slivers. So these were the images that I printed on silk. And it was up front that I knew I was going to be shooting for this particular surface. I decided that I wanted to have this watery feel that I thought would pair really well with the fabric. And it's a horizontal full frame image. And then it's the second horizontal full frame image of the pattern. So I cut the pattern in half, put half of that photo at the top and the bottom to make the groovy borders, and stuck the other image right in the middle. And I did that with every single shot, and it was hard. It was very hard. The birds were the worst subject I've ever had. They were totally unbossable. But I wrote this really lofty grant proposal that I was going to do this. And then when I won and got accepted, then I started crying because, oh my gosh, now I'm really going to have to do all this and make it work. But that deadline made me do it. And I'm really, really glad that I did now. It was, it's been in a bunch of shows, but this was the very first one. Was back in 2007 at the original Mason Muir location. And this was printed on tile. So composing it, I had to know, and you can see their grout line. So I couldn't have the grout line going between part of her face, you know. So this is a composed image where I took different pieces and parts. This is not obviously one shot, but I did have to be very aware where those intersecting lines of the tile were going to hit, and not go through the fish's face, not go through her face, you know. And also the colors I picked to go with these old antique tiles that I've collected. I have an antique tile problem where I've collected all of this old stuff, and then I'll go back and create an image to go with it. And here you can see in the final, in the bottom right, the little frieze of the old tile. This was a studio shot where I had to get a full range of motion and have it plotted in this specific shape to make this contraption. And it spins around. I think it'll play. It may be loud. It's kind of loud, sorry. And that was my model there on the right, watching herself spin around doing this invocation. So, you know, I'm really hyper aware of the edges of everything that I'm working on. This was a very, very big wall, and I wanted to give the illusion of depth. So it's really 2 to 3 ratio full frame images put together into a panorama. So this whole series really was about the foreground coming out at you and shapes creating tension from the frame. So it's a sense of space and depth perception, but I also knew that it was going to be on a wall. So I kind of knew ahead of time how it was going to work within the space. I mean, it's still not the same as seeing it up on the wall. But it was very helpful having that space up front before I started creating it. And this was for a installation for a private residence. And they wanted to use these other kind of hooks that wouldn't mess up the wall. So I thought it would be okay, but I don't know if I told you guys the story or not, but I got it on the wall and they left to go out to dinner and they came back and the apartment was really hot. And they're like, what is going on? The image had fallen, and to the left there's a little switch, and that switch turns on their gas logs. And it was in the summertime. So it fell down, hit the switch, turned on their gas logs, and luckily there was no, disaster. But I've been very aware since then to make sure I have everything really, really anchored in place. These images are also exercises in seeing how close to the edge I can get. And the tension of the design of each one was a compositional choice. So I would try this as a fun assignment, of moving closer and closer as you shoot, and just naturally starting to make intuitive compositional choices that are interesting. And these are choices that are going to be given to you as you're out there in the field with your camera. It's not something you can really think about, because I think a lot of times we think, oh, we need to take this classical shot, that there's a scenic way that we should show the landscape, and we're very much mindful of images that we see all the time, images that we've seen before. But when you're in the moment, you may see something that has never been seen before, and you need to be conscious of it and use the full frame and really capture that wonderful surprise that's happening. When something wonderful happens, when it starts to happen and we see those shapes starting to converge and come together, then it's that tension of the moment that we need to be ready, ready to get. And a couple of these, the two figures that were in those big spheres at the park, just where the two balls had overlapped and where they're sort of faced toward each other. I knew when I got the shot, because I could see it, and I was like, oh, I hope I got it. And I was like, oh yeah, I know I got it. And I did. It was lucky and fortunate, but I was trying. And the same with the two swans, they were, you could see it happening, and it's like, when is the perfect moment of tension? Right before they are nose to nose, or rather, sorry, bill to bill. Doing the same thing, but these are with cats. And I don't know where this thing is coming from.
Michael Barham put that up there.
I don't know. Some kind of mystical symbol has appeared. That's really strange. Well, that's okay.
Interesting.
So you guys, use the word separation. You know what that is. But here, it's the alignment with space all around. There's no overlapping. If they had all been standing in front of each other, it wouldn't have been a cool shot, right? This is from the St. Simon's workshop that we're doing in November and April of next year. and the slice of tension between the two buildings is what I'm looking for. Unfortunately, this alignment was in the middle of West Peachtree Street, looking north. So I went very early on a Sunday morning, and Bill was looking out for me. So if a car would start to come, he would yell and I would run out of the road. But I had to get there to get this alignment. And, you know, when it's right, you know it. When it's good, you feel it. When you find these little alignments in the moment, I think that's what our photography is really all about. Again, how things are framed. This is using trees to frame the real subject. Here, the real subject, the couple, the bicycles, the lighthouse, they're tiny, but the shapes of the trees are being used to frame them. I'm always looking for an unexpected composition, a pairing of colors to connect it, a foreground, big object in the foreground against something else going on in the background. And the silhouette, you know, it's, I'm always looking for the shadowy figure that's against this lighter, more simplified background. And again, it's the separation and the tension between the two subjects. When I had the online photo party that we have the second Saturday of every month, I asked the question, what is the one best photograph, your favorite photograph that you've ever taken? And this was mine because it's a lucky shot from the passenger seat. And again, I could see it happening. You know, the guys going up the hill, that's why the sky is behind him. And this is in Italy where they have these little trucks that are so cute. And I've tried, anytime I see one when I'm there, I was like, oh, I'm going to try to get that shot. And I've never been able to get it again because the alignment was never right. There would always be something that would obscure the passenger. There would be trees behind them. You know, this was just one of those moments. And the two signs and his ears and the rear view mirror and all of that, that was not something that I controlled. So for that reason, I have a really very special place in my heart for this shot. But if you think about, you know, what is your favorite shot? There's probably some moment, something that happened that as you were in the moment that made it have meaning for you. Watch out for offensive shrubbery and other mood killers. And oh yes, they are always lurking. They will creep into your frame when you least expect it. And this happens to me all the time. You know, ugly street signs, they fall into this category too. And they are definitely mood killers. Avoid chain link fences unless they are part of your design. Yes, it's not going to happen. There's always clutter, trash cans, parked cars, fences, and there's always an ugly, scraggly ass plant, AKA offensive shrubbery. You know, here in this one, on this one right here, these flowers are pretty, but the way I have them sticking in like that, it's offensive shrubbery. So, you know, instead of cropping it, because I like this triangle shape around her, I would just retouch it out. And that would simplify it and make it stronger. Shadows. what we don't see, what's hidden in the shadows. In some ways, this is even more important than the subject itself. You know, the shadow is like a setting that holds the subject, and the subject is the jewel. So, you know, when we're looking at figures and scenes, let shadows work for you. You can get this real cinematic drama. And this whole story, well, I wrote about it on my blog. I won't go into it, but on robindavis.com, if you go to blog, you'll see the story about what really happened with this. This was not something that I expected to be photographing. It was really a cool synchronicity. And also, this is another piece that I wrote on my personal website. It's not thethirdeyephoto.com. That's the workshop website. It's robindavis.com. And if you click on blog, you can hear more about what I'm secretly thinking. Use the shapes of clouds and of everything within your shot. You know, this line in the foreground was really helpful. And I was careful to get just the top of the cloud in there to structurally hold it. You know, also with this one, if I had too much space above the cloud, it wouldn't have the tension. And if I had cropped off the cloud, it would lose this wonderful diagram that's secretly there, you know, hidden in the shot. So clouds start to play jokes on me. They actually mimic what's below. And I didn't notice it at the time, but on the left, the clouds were making the same shapes as the landscape below, which it really kind of terrified me. And then what really terrified me is in this one with this foo dog statue in this topiary garden, the cloud behind it is starting to make this other foo dog head. And I did not do anything to put it in there. I promise you, it really kind of frightened me. But you know, if they're good clouds, put a lot of sky. Have everything small and tight at the bottom. But then again, by the opposite, if it's a solid blue sky, then crop it all out and have a really big foreground and get tension, you know, right above the castle. Here I intentionally made the shot very dark and dramatic. It did not look this moody in real life, but because that lighthouse is so white and the clouds are so white, I just exposed for the very brightest part and let the rest go dark. And then the shapes of the clouds became much more prominent. If you were just standing here looking at it in real life, the clouds were there, but it didn't have that texture and drama. Again, here the subject is the clouds, and the dark exposure makes them more moody. And here again, I'm exposing for the clouds, so I get detail in the highlights, and then everything else just becomes a moody shadow. Compositionally, these clouds are making this really strong triangle, and then there are these other triangle shapes in the figures in the monuments. These two little clouds were coming fast. She's standing on a trash can on the corner of a building, and my assistant is under the dress behind her, holding her butt so she is stable. And there were no clouds. And I'm like, gosh, I wish there were some clouds. And then these two little clouds started, and they were coming fast. I mean, they were like moving. And I told her, I said, this is it. This is the moment. We are in the moment now. You have to feel it. You have to nail the pose. And she did. And I just barely got the little clouds there. But, for me, for this series, I wanted to suffer. I wanted to wait for the clouds. We would go out and shoot, and the sun would go, the clouds would go, and I didn't get a shot. I didn't get a shot that day, and I didn't put any images in the series that weren't as strong as the next one. I was originally supposed to have 7, and I only ended up having 5 that were as equally, to me, as appropriate as the next one. So again, the trick for when I don't have clouds is to look for shapes. This is using infrared, where the solid blue sky just goes black. And I've cropped out most of the sky. The other trick, I think, is visual simplicity in our photography. Our images get stronger when we simplify, and less is definitely more. It's what has consciously been left out. Just going around on a walk, I saw this one shoe, and it's laying there on the ground, but there are all these shapes and diagonals behind it. So I photographed it. There's something about one lost shoe that kind of intrigues me, and definitely makes me wonder. But there was a lot of other stuff around here that would have taken away from the simplicity of the graphic shape. Fog is another way to simplify a scene. So if you guys see fog, anything that you photograph in the fog, it may be something really familiar to you right down the street, but if it's foggy, get your camera and get out there. I have friends that get up earlier than I do, and they have permission to call me very early if there's fog. This is the subject just against the sky. It's just the shapes of her against the shapes of the clouds. And another way to simplify is depth of field. Low depth of field. Here, this foreground was so ugly. These weeds were not attractive, but when they became blurry, they became beautiful, almost this like curtain where we're looking through. And of course, the sharp focus is on the bird. My other most favorite shot, I think, would be this one, because again, it's simple. It has continued to be a favorite. And when I'm out thinking about the kind of images that I really want to take, I really want to do more and more stuff like this. And I don't want you guys to have too much of a preconception of what's right and wrong, because this image on the left has been a really, really popular image. But if you look at it, it's tilted, it's blurry and out of focus, it's overexposed. When I took it, it was totally a mistake. That's actually one of my students coming into this creepy castle, abandoned castle that we go to on this island in Italy. But yet I love it because it creates emotional drama. There's a mystery to it, and there's an intrigue. So that's why they've used it for publishing, because it's the mystery that compels us. And I also learned that when you're working with publishers and for book covers, they love negative space because they can put type there. Negative space. So when we take time to look at these shapes, and then we're dancing around with our camera, and we get closer, closer, closer. It wasn't until I got closest that I liked the shot. And then I realized it's this X. It doesn't matter that I lost the top of her head. We know it's there, If you saw it, it actually took away from the picture. So these are the kind of things I'm thinking about when I'm out with my camera. I made this little overview of our thoughts today. So if you would like, I will send you a copy of this so that you can look at it later. And the last time I was with you guys, I did this as a challenge. And I, again, would challenge you to start your own series and look for something that really, really interests you. It could be a place, it could be a subject, but make up your own set of rules. Start by saying all these images are going to be squares or rectangles of a certain shape. And the format, the tonality, the visual feel that you want to have, really think big. Think as big as you can possibly imagine. Don't think, that would be too hard, or I don't know. I don't know what I would really want to do. There's so much stuff that I'm interested in. We're all there, but the people the photographers that we know and that we hear about are the ones that boil it down and have some consistency and start out making images that fit together. So I will leave you guys with that thought.
Well, Robin, thank you. It's been fantastic. But before you go, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself? I'm sorry I didn't do that in the beginning, but if you would, about your workshops or your classes, that monthly thing that you've got going on, whatever. Would you please do that?
Definitely. And I've got a little calendar here. So online photo party is the second Saturday of the month. People can send me images the Friday beforehand to be in the slideshow, but we really, really talk about aspects of photography that I think rarely get discussed, but that are very, very important. But also, it's a very fun time. You can joke around, and people get a lot out of the feedback that they get from the other photographers. And it's about an hour to an hour and a half the second Saturday at 2 p.m. So you can register. It's $10, and you can register on thethirdeyephoto.com. The website is right here, thethirdeyephoto.com at the bottom. I love doing one-on-one projects, working with you guys, coming up with a formula that you're going to follow to do a series, really, really digging down to the kind of photographs, really soul level photographs that you want to take. I do hourly and half-hour sessions that have been really rewarding, also for me, because I get to see what people are doing with their work, and I love that. That's something that I'm continuing to do I was doing it in person again, but I'm probably going to go back to online, or I also have a outside patio connected to my studio where we can meet. This top workshop is already passed, and the next St. Simon's workshop is actually sold out, but I am going to do the St. Simon's spring photo workshop in April. And as of now, those are my officially posted, let's go out and meet in public workshops. I have the France and Italy workshops on the calendar, but I'm still kind of waiting to see how all that's going to shake out. But I really, really love hearing from you guys. And if you have any questions, I'll tell you everything I know.
That was great. Thank you, ma'am. Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, I've got one for you, Robin. You were talking about the silk images, or the images done on the silk fabric, and I love. It's too big to be a heron, I think, but the bird, the white bird that's horizontal to the ground and flying. I noticed that you've got. Yeah, there you go. So the bird is super. Can you talk to me about how you did the backgrounds, how you did the composites?
Yes. First of all, I shot this in 2007. I shot it on film, so it was really, really hard to get the birds. I mean, I wasted a lot of film, but I was using a really, really cheap lens. And I found using retrofitting old lenses. This was one of those mirror lenses. It's like $90. The Phoenix lens. It's a 600 lens that's extended by a mirror that's on the inside. But what that did, oh, and you have to manually focus it, which you have to want to make a game out of it, right? But what that does is it simplifies the background. So in real life, all of that swamp behind the bird was really mud and sticks, and it just was not. Part of it was attractive, but it was too complicated. So that lens allowed that background to allow the bird and the feathers and all the articulation on the bird to be really sharp, but the background was made more painterly. The second image was done pretty much like the very first series I showed you. These images where I'm shooting straight down into the water. And this is a spring green. These were taken in black swamp water, which makes a great mirror surface to reflect in. And the Aqua Avia series, this was had more autumn colors in the surrounding trees. So in the swamp water, it made these really, really groovy patterns. And all of these, you can't really see them. These are cloud shapes. But the reflection I did at the same time that I did the bird shot. So I tried to get the birds to act right. I tried to compose and get a good shot of the bird in action. And then I said, okay, I need my top and bottom frame. Then I would go up to the water's edge and point down and look for abstractions and groovy patterns.
Robin, I have a question for you concerning the swamp water shots. How do you avoid casting shadows when you're that close to the water?
Oh, I usually had the sun to it was shining back on me, or it was either coming from the right or the left. So
Okay.
the sun was not behind me in those cases, so I did not even think about it. It was no problem. I was lucky.
Yeah. One more question, if you will. On your staircase shots, what type of lens were you using? Was it a regular 35, I mean, a 50 millimeter or what? When you did the staircases?
These, I actually did these with my phone,
Wow.
and I put it to a flare view so that it let me see, and it put the film border. So
Oh,
and
yeah.
I know that that's going to go on there. You can kind of see that how that worked. But I love the phone because you can see, it makes you really aware of everything. I mean, I still shoot film cameras. I still look through the viewfinder,
Mhm.
but with the phone where you're seeing it, you can see the edge to edge to edge. So
Yeah.
composing, it let me be very aware of how the shapes were filling the frame.
Okay. And were you using natural lighting, or did you have either type of lighting? Did you use a flash from your phone?
It was all light that was coming in from the window, and I didn't have any way to control it, because it was at there was an estate sale going on. So I
Yeah.
just walked in and saw that and was like, oh wow. It's in this old house that was built in the 1920s on Clifton Road.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not, I was not expecting to do a photo shoot, but and I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, this is talking to me. I've whipped out my phone and I got these shots. But behind me and all in the house, there were people everywhere. There was stuff for sale. It was total chaos. But yet I found these really restful shapes.
So Robin, maybe I can ask you a follow-up question to this. It got me thinking with the model. I think she was holding a lute and you were thinking about going back in time, but maybe these photos are good as well. How much ends up being very intentional, that you have a plan and you go forward, versus you're there in the moment and you see something and go for it? Or maybe, like you're saying, you've got a theme, so you're not after a particular photograph per se, but you have some elements that you're looking for.
It depends. When I'm doing a shoot with a model, there's part of it that's intentional, and then there's always this cool thing that happens that I don't expect, that I'm ready for. They may have they may be posing, but then there may be a fleeting moment when they laugh or they're thinking about something and their eyes sparkle and there's something more genuine that comes through, even though they're in this really controlled setting. Now, this shoot was part of the Cortona Center workshop. And on all of my workshops, I try to have a mixture of nature, landscape, street photography, and then we'll always have a model shoot or two. And this is a really wonderful girl that lives in Cortona, and I got her to meet there, and she's actually wearing, it's her skirt. She's wearing my shirt, and yes, I had another shirt, and the lute was just there as part of the decoration. This is the front part of the palazzo is a wonderful restaurant that we go to. So they let us go in the afternoon, and there were, tables and all other kind of stuff in there that we moved back. But the room is that yellow color, and when the afternoon sunlight comes in, the room is magical. So I asked them, can we shoot in the pretty room? I call it the Peacock Room because it has the picture of the peacock. And they're like, oh, yeah. And so I invited her to come, and we together kind of put together the outfit, and all my students are there, and we all took turns directing her. I made them aware of the window light, of her shadow. And this lute was just there. And, it was a surprise, but it ended up being, to me, it made the shot because it looks like something's going on, right?
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's good insights. Thank you.
And I think for myself with photography, there's my intention, and then there's the gift that the world gives back to you. And the really great shots have equal parts of both. It's like, I know I want to have this mood and mystery to my shots. I know I want to look like I'm time traveling. But there may be something like the one of the girl with the cherry blossoms, that's a really pretty spot, but right next to it, there's something that's just totally hideous. So the background, the background is something I look for as much as I look for my subjects, and you think, oh, if I'm going to have the setting, I have to have this big area. Well, there could just be this little bit of a corner of a wall or something that looks ancient. And there could be, some like a ugly car parked right next to it that's going to not look like the Middle Ages, right? But I'm going to compose it. I keep saying crop, but in camera, but I mean, I'm going to compose it so that I'm only letting you see what I want you to see.
You staying on this picture and using your term of offensive shrubbery, why isn't the fireplace not an offensive shrubbery? Because it is the highest contrast, and the two squares don't match the rest of the room or her flowing lines.
It didn't. I mean, to me, I did not find it to be an offending thing. I mean, it's like sort of a negative space. I mean, our mind knows that it's a fireplace. I liked the architectural shape, coming in where we know that it's a room in the palazzo, but it's not, there's not enough detail in there for me personally to be. He's offended by the fireplace. Come here. Come here.
What?
He hates offensive compositions.
My cat just about jumped out of her skin behind me here. What the heck was that?
His hearing is not so good, so he does not know how to modulate his voice.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that's interesting. And I really appreciate your opinion, Umit. And if it's an offensive element, how would I get rid of it? Well, maybe what I would do is just, I love all this other stuff that's going on. I like the photograph, the little stuff going on the wall. Maybe I would clone part of this wall and then just put it in there so it looked more like an edge, and maybe it wasn't so dark. I don't know.
Well, thank you, Robin. Can I make one more comment about the iPhone photography? I did
Sure.
a Kelby One seminar about a month ago. It was a 2-day seminar. I had 8 professional photographers giving lessons on it. And they are saying that what you need to do is know that nowadays you have a camera that you can make phone calls on. That's their attitude toward their phones anymore. There's several of the pro photographers that's all they're using anymore.
I love it. I mean, I use it all the time. I mean, the only drawback is that I wish I could make a bigger print, that it was a bigger image, but I'm printed,
What about gigapixel?
yeah. That's the thing.
I'm hoping it works anyway.
Last
Huh?
month we had 2 winners with the cell phone. Tim Wolf's pictures were both cell phone. I don't know if you knew that.
I did. Yeah.
They were great pictures.
I mean, there's no stigma about using your phone. I mean, people think it's not a real thing, but it's like anything, it's how you use it. And for composition, it's been one of my favorite tools. And like you said, it's always there,
Yeah, the best camera you can have is the one you got with you.
Beautifully said.
Well, I'm going to stop the recording.